Let's get to the January 6th defendants. Emerged from custody after Trump issues pardons. The Brotherhood of the Police, the unions, are very upset, it seems, that Donald Trump pardoned people who beat the shit out of cops.
The officers feel hurt and betrayed, and it's a slap in the face.
In an internal memo obtained by ABC News, the chief of Capitol Police saying, when there is no price to pay for violence against law enforcement, it sends a message that politics matter more than our first responders. The president's pardons include more than 600 people charged with assaulting or resisting law enforcement. On Capitol Hill, many Republicans not pushing back.
I think like the annoying part of all of this, to me at least, is that one, this is unpopular, but it still doesn't matter because like he's giving his most active base of support, his biggest sycophants, a major W. He's saying like, listen, you stood by me and I'm going to stand by you. Okay. That's important. That's important for Trump, especially because if he wants to have like some semblance of brown shirts who will do his bidding in ways that like even the police or the military might not be able to do within the existing legal confines, these guys will now feel emboldened. Okay. That's really important to understand. They will feel emboldened. They will feel like Donald Trump has their back. So that's really important for him. But the thing that's really frustrating to me about this is that like you can go to jail for a million different stupid things in this country. Okay. If you're poor, you have a very high likelihood of finding yourself within the throes of the criminal justice system. And unfortunately for many, the American criminal justice system is not exactly open-minded. They will cook you. They will ruin your life for the rest of your life. So that double standard here is probably frustrating for many Americans who are like, well, my dad got a resisting arrest charge for speaking back to a police officer at a regular traffic stop. Okay. And he had to spend time in prison for that. But these guys actually literally beat the out of cops in an insurrection, and now they're walking free and pardoned and have their records expunged. Like, that's crazy. My buddy spit on a cop and got 3 years. Yeah, that's considered assault on a peace officer. And straight up, judges will throw the book at you. Okay, it's crazy.
If they were given to people who committed violent crimes, including assaulting police officers or breaking windows.
But Alabama,
I hate these people so much. It's all aesthetics. The Republicans that are at the edge of the party, and this is like an especially dying breed. Republicans at the edge of the party that are an especially dying breed, like Susan Collins, okay? So annoying because they always hit that Democrat line where they're like, we are looking at this. I am very concerned. I'm very concerned. It's like, oh, really? You're concerned, Susan Collins? Great. Thank you. I hadn't heard that 700,000 times the last time Donald Trump was president. And then you always go out of your way to vote alongside Donald Trump 90+% of the time. I'm always looking into it. I'm Susan. I'm always looking into it. And I'm always feeling very concerned, okay? Also, here's the other part of this. Look at that. Truth bomb, baby. Biden pardoning Hunter is more unpopular than Trump pardoning the January 6 rioters per Wall Street Journal poll. Hunter pardon, 22% support, 74% opposed. January 6 pardons, 43% support, 54%, okay? That's a truth nuke for you, okay? There you go. There you go. How is that possible? What are you talking about? One is read as a spoiled Nepo baby who was presented as like the worst villain of the Biden administration, in many instances unjustifiably, because he was just a crackhead fail son, okay? And they greatly overemphasized his crimes and routinely lied about it. They said that he was like doing crazy wheeling and dealing at the behest of the Biden crime family or whatever. The other, the January 6 political hostages, was presented as like a group of, you know, political hostages that were unfairly maligned and unjustifiably prosecuted by the big, scary Brandon administration. In some instances, you have to remember, media is very powerful, okay? And in other circumstances, you have to remember, January 6 jet ski dealership owners and numerous other people are closer, both aesthetically and also through their class position, to the random hogs that are living in these random neighborhoods, as opposed to the fail son of a deeply unpopular, decrepit old man who was the president, okay? But ultimately, It doesn't matter. Popularity and popular support for these actions don't matter. That is the point I wanted to make. It does not matter. Do you see what I'm saying? When is the last time, with the exception of Trump actually pushing a stay of execution for TikTok, or with the exception of Donald Trump before he came into office, pushing Israel to at least follow through on the ceasefire in the interim period as they light the West Bank on fire, obviously. With those two exceptions, and also, I guess, like swapping out Joe Biden 100 days out from the election, when have you ever seen the American government in all of its different units, right? Not just like the legislative body, but the judiciary, all the way up to the Supreme Court. When is the last time you've seen the American government respond to popular sentiment with, we hear you, we see you, we're going to enact this agenda? I ask you seriously. I ask you sincerely. When is the last time you've seen any member of the government successfully push for, in our lifetimes, successfully push for something that virtually everybody wanted? I guess stimmy checks is one of them. Stimmy checks would be a good example of this. But even then, that was like a necessity. Even Obamacare was like gutted and destroyed. It was supposed to have the public option, and they cooked it and they destroyed it and lied about it actively, as the Democratic Party did the classic move of like trying to find bipartisan compromise with a party that was not interested in compromising with them at all, and we're getting rewarded for behaving in an obstructionist manner and lying about everything related to Obamacare in general. But the stimmy checks was a necessity. It was a necessity. I guess you could also say same-sex marriage, maybe. I mean, I guess that's another one. Fair. That's a good one. That's another good one. So the point is, the American government does not necessarily care about popular sentiment. You know what I mean? They just don't care. They don't really care at all. And I don't think that gay marriage was at the time seen as like a bipartisan thing that the entirety of the country wanted, if we're being real, if we're being really real. People are saying cannabis, but that's another great example. Like, this is federal level decriminalization of marijuana has been like 90% popular in perpetuity. Okay? Universal background checks, 90% popularity in perpetuity. 75% of NRA card-carrying members want universal background checks. That would be a federal piece of legislation. So, like, even when you think about all of the most popular policies, it's always something that the government has to neuter effectively, okay? But I can give you a million examples of the government, whether it be the Supreme Court or whether it be the legislative body, actively working against the overwhelming majority's wishes, time and time again. Whether it be enforcing a ceasefire in Gaza by denying weapons transfers. Like, this was objectively a popular concept. Or even if the denying weapons transfers was not, even if that wasn't a popular part of this idea, okay, the ceasefire was a popular concept. And obviously the only way to do that would be by forcing Israel to, concede. And if they didn't, you just refuse to give them weapons. They didn't do that. Universal health care, not happening. There are plenty of popular things that can only pass through ballot measures on a state-by-state basis because the national parties don't actually care to do anything. They don't actually care to enforce the popular agenda of the people. Donald Trump, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily care about the overarching popular sentiment, and neither do the Democrats. But when Democrats actually do something that's like objectively unpopular, like, finding bipartisan compromise for the TikTok ban that the Democratic president signs into law, they're doing that at the behest of their corporate benefactors. Now, does Donald Trump do that as well? Of course. And he does it in even worse ways than the Democrats do, like the tax cuts for the super wealthy, right? That he passed in 2017, 2018. Having said that, every now and then, Donald Trump loves to get a good W in his corner. And that's what's going on here. That's what's happening here. I'm going to be honest with you. On the one hand, this is a newsworthy thing that Donald Trump did. And it is kind of wild that he did blanket pardons. Okay. On the other hand, the media is back to doing hypocrisy baiting and hypocrisy fishing. At a certain point, we all got to take a deep breath and recognize that, number one, January 6th stuff clearly doesn't play well to the broader audience, and they just don't care about it as much as, liberals do, like hyper invested media obsessed liberals do. And last but not least, and this is perhaps the most important point that I want to address, nobody cares about hypocrisy. Like no Republican is ever going to turn around and be like, oh man, you really caught me here. Donald Trump pardoned police beaters. Oh, I'm really going to reconsider my position here. It is not going to happen. You will never, ever, ever get a Republican to turn around and say, you know what? This is a bridge too far for me. If that was the case, then the Democrats would have won the last election because this is what they ran on. Okay. This is what they ran on. They constantly ran on this, the January 6th stuff over and over and over again. And I think it melted the minds of a lot of liberals who are basically just slammed to their televisions, like hyper focusing on what they see from the TV. They just could not comprehend the reality that like people outside of people that are, you know, watching MSNBC and CNN that are like perma stuck in that little media ecosystem, an increasingly smaller audience of people, mind you. Outside of that, no one really cared about it.
I think what was made clear all along is that peaceful protests and people who engage in that should never be punished. There was a weaponization of the Justice Department. There was a weaponization of the events, the following, the prosecutions that happened after January 6th. It was a terrible time and a terrible chapter in America's history. The president's made his decision. I don't second guess those. And yes, you know, it's kind of my ethos, my worldview. We believe in redemption. We believe in second chances. If you would argue that those people didn't pay a heavy...
Bro, that's awesome. Like, they're talking like prison abolitionists right now, man. They're like, hey, man, well, you have to have a focus on rehabilitation rather than incarceration. I think it's been far too long in this nation's dark past where we have decided that the draconian nature of the criminal justice system must be as torturous as possible. This is clearly not a successful method. These people have paid the ultimate price for being law-abiding, peaceful citizens as they peacefully beat the out of cops on the Capitol Rotunda. Okay? I wouldn't dare. But if I was, I wouldn't have liked it. But I've totally forgotten about it now because my Lord King Savior Donald Trump decided that they're going to get pardoned.
Penalty, having been incarcerated and all of that's up to you. But the president's made a decision. We move forward.
These guys will straight up say that, like, the overwhelming majority of Black Lives Matter protests did not turn into riots. The ones that did turn into riots because cops were brutalizing the protesters. Okay, they always escalate. And given the anti-cop nature of the Black Lives Matter protests, of course, cops were going to always escalate and be brutal. And they act like every city was burned to the goddamn ground. Meanwhile, these dudes straight up in broad daylight were like, we love rioting and going into the Capitol building. Okay? We love it. I can't wait to apprehend physically and violently Nancy Pelosi and do a citizen's arrest on Nancy Pelosi. Here, I brought my zip ties with me. I can't wait to do that. My name is such and such. They've literally did this in broad daylight, and these guys are like, you know, these were just peaceful people that wanted to see the inside of the people's house. I didn't realize that it was illegal for the people of the United States of America to enter the people's house.
The leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers were freed following the pardons yesterday. At the time, back in 2021, you urged them to stand back and stand by. Is there now a place for them in the political conversation?
Well, we have to say they've been given a pardon. I thought...
Oh my God. This journalist basically is like, hey, are you going to utilize the Proud Boys to do your most violent bidding? And he's like, we'll see.
What's your message to people watching this who say, she shouldn't have been pardoned, none of these people should have got out of prison, they're criminals?
Okay, you know what? It's time to stop worrying about that. And
dude, that's the peak, okay? That's the most awesome way to be, to just be like, you don't understand, okay? No matter what, I will go to jail on my own. Please do not harm my president, who said I was bad right after it became politically unpopular. Here's the latest standing: attacking the seat of the U.S. government, beating the shit out of cops, saying you're going to arrest and possibly hang the Republican vice president of the party that you are a supporter of is peaceful. 18-year-olds camping and playing guitar on their own university campus. Worse terror attack than 9/11. They're all Hamas. They're all actually being brainwashed by the Iranian mullahs. Okay, the Ayatollah is basically on college campuses, and we have to bring in the terror squad. Incredible. Now, of course, make no mistake, these guys are also simultaneously Antifa. Okay, they're simultaneously agents of the FBI and Antifa at the same time, because initially they were like, oh, it's Antifa that did this, when they were like, this is violent and unacceptable, and that's because Antifa did this. It's Antifa. Except they didn't prosecute the Antifa. They only prosecuted the brave patriots that were political prisoners. And also, it wasn't even violent at all, okay? It wasn't even violent at all. It was just a peaceful day at the Rotunda. Aren't we doing hypocrisy baiting? Or is this just entertainment? I don't know. I'm high. I come at this with the understanding that virtually no one cares about this. The broad majorities of the American public are not as invested in the story as the way that the media presents it. It's just funny. It's entertainment, okay? This is one of the least impactful aspects of the Trump administration, okay? It's not something that I think a lot of people truly care about, but the ones that do really care about it, okay? The ones that care about January 6th really care about it. What I mean by this is, on the Republican side, the ones that are like the immediate family members, with the exception of the HasanAbi head, who has to now go into hiding because his dad is out of prison. The Republicans that really care about it are elated. They're super excited that Trump actually pardoned these guys and emboldened them, okay? On the liberal side, the ones who care about it really care about it as well. The number of people, especially on the liberal side, that really care about this are obviously super marginal. And even if they respond to a poll and they say like, oh, I think this is like really disrespectful or whatever, it ultimately does not matter, because the American government, you know, Democratic control, Republican control, doesn't really matter. The American government doesn't really do things that people have a lot of negative feelings about anyway, or a lot of positive feelings about anyway. Like, the American government doesn't really abide by the democratic wishes of the broad majorities of the public. I think it's pretty impactful to essentially give Americans immunity for any crimes in the name of the president, right? No, that will have really important implications down the line, for sure. Especially when you factor in like organized militias that have only grown in size and influence in the time frame that these guys went to jail. It definitely is a terrifying precedent later down the line. But that's usually not what people are talking about in this situation. Most people are just looking at this and talking about how hypocritical it is that Trump is doing this, myself included. But make no mistake, I'm just, you know, I'm talking about it from the aspect of like entertainment and hogwatch, and the hypocrisy baiting is not like the major point that I'm trying to address here at all. You cannot try to catch Republicans in hypocrisy. It didn't work the last election cycle, and it didn't work the election cycle in the past as well. Like, when Trump was president, this is all liberals did, okay? This is all the hashtag resistance liberalism was about. Oh, now we think it's okay when Trump does it. It's like, yeah, no, they just genuinely don't care. And they genuinely do think it's okay when Trump does it. And they will act like they care when the Democrats actually do something that comes across as hypocritical. It's the strategy. It's the game plan. If anything, I think liberals should learn from that. This is something that I have advocated for quite a bit. Most famously on the Pod Save America interview that I had that went viral in a lot of liberal circles, where I said, I want the Democrats to fight. I want a competent Democratic Party that is willing to fight, okay? Willing to fight for good things, willing to fight for the common good, even if it doesn't come across as inherently popular or immediately popular. And I want them to expend social and political capital on things that actually do materially improve people's lives. I care about my fellow Americans. I care about their lives getting better, improving their material conditions. I recognize that if Democrats keep losing, then Republicans are going to keep ruining this country further. And I want the Democrats to win. I want to be the most regime-pilled propaganda minister you've ever seen.
That's what I want for you.
But I can't do that if the Democratic Party is not offering anything. I want him to do that in the same way that Trump does, right? Because Trump does that. This is one of the things that I wouldn't say necessarily admire about Donald Trump, but this is one of the things that I think Donald Trump does very well. If there is something that he can get an easy W off of, if there are a group of people out there that are genuinely passionate about a particular issue, even if it's like, you know, kind of unpopular or whatever in the eyes of the broad majority, like these are low-hanging fruit things for him. He just will go and you know, he'll secure those votes. This is one of those instances. He also has obviously a tendency to be very telegenic and knows how to draw in a crowd and make people pay attention to him. And he did precisely that with his executive order signatures that he conducted on the first day, right? On the day of the inauguration. He knows how to keep people paying attention to what he's doing and present it as a positive. It's one of the, I would say, worst aspects of the Joe Biden administration was the fact that it was led by a guy who was a crippled old man who genuinely couldn't do that. He could not even actively communicate some of the good things that they were doing, albeit marginal, but they still could have done a better job of conveying that message to the public to be like, see, these are the things that we're doing. Donald Trump is a great marketer. Problem is, the things he's marketing are usually very bad.
This term, they're seeking to undermine the ATF's ability to regulate ghost guns. These are weapons that can pass through a metal detector without being detected. All of these things make officers of the law less safe and undermine our ability to enforce the law in this country. And yet they try to claim that they're the law and order party. It's no longer supportable.
Dude, you know what this reminds me of before we move on to some other stuff here? This reminds me of the endless need for the Democratic Party to run patriotic candidates. This reminds me of when Donald Trump came out and was like, John McCain is a loser. I like my war heroes who weren't captured.
Somebody should run against John McCain, who has been, in my opinion, not so hot. And I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. It's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero. He's a war hero. He's a war hero. 5.5 years. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you. Do you agree with that?
And everyone was like, this is surely going to take him down. Last time Trump won the election, if you remember. And the Democrats were like, finally, we can be the patriotic party. Finally, let's keep running the most boring, annoying, technocratic, smarmy veterans and try to maintain this position that in the South, we are the actual party that cares about patriotism. Look at all our veterans that we're posting. Look at all our veterans that we're putting forward, not realizing that no one cares. No one cares. And this is what the Democrats have always done. They've always done this. And now they think they're going to be like, well, it's obvious that the Republicans are not the law and order party. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? They don't care, man. I don't know how to describe this to you. You cannot outflank the Republicans on patriotism. They own it, okay? In the United States of America, the collective consciousness surrounding patriotism is not what you think it is, okay? It's not what you think it is. Patriotism in America is not represented by, actually respecting the veterans and showing reverence or whatever. It's actually about how racist you can be about Muslim people or whoever America's enemies are at that time, okay? It is completely and entirely dominated by the right wing. They control that narrative. They control the standards of patriotism. If you think that you have any say in reframing patriotism from a liberal perspective, you are delusional. It's almost as delusional as thinking that people care about the civility and the optics of it all. No one cares. It's almost as delusional as thinking that like the incredibly divisive and sectarian nature of simply hyper focusing on identity markers as a mechanism of like undermining progressive people within the ranks of your own party. Just a major own. No one cares. Republicans do it all the time too. No one actually cares. Like the cancel culture stuff is just so stupid. Hyper focusing on that and thinking that this is a reasonable way to do politics is so bad. It just makes you look like a freaking HR manager, okay? It's so dumb. Do things that help people. Please, for the love of Christ, do things that help people and actively talk about how you're doing those things and market them. It seems like the Democratic Party has decided, no, we're just going to be the gay, smarmy version of the Republicans. You will never be able to decouple reactionary right-wing politics from law and order messaging, okay? It does not matter because the entirety of the right-wing messaging is about dominating the field of law and order in the way that they think is law and order. The same goes for free speech, okay? when Americans talk about free speech, the way that they understand free speech is basically when Americans talk about free speech, they're talking about slurs, being able to say slurs and not having any repercussions for being able to say slurs. They're not talking about actual speech that undermines the pre-existing hierarchies. They're not talking about free speech as like saying, you know, Israel sucks or whatever. They're talking about the freedom to say slurs without repercussions. That's the way that they talk about free speech. And it's not about the government actually coming in and offering legal penalties for you saying whatever. It's actually just private companies and private organizations not deboosting you or shadow banning you or whatever people believe is happening. Okay? That's what this is about. And there is no greater indication of this inherent like silliness, okay, than the way that Marco Rubio and many other Republicans have talked about what they're going to do, what their mandate is going forward. On the one hand, as the leaked State Department memo that came out from Ken Klippenstein that we covered yesterday, Marco Rubio said they're going to go after DEI, okay? One of the scariest things that Marco Rubio also mentioned was in the bullet points in the memo that he was sending to the State Department, okay? The new Secretary of State that was voted in unanimously, including by the likes of Bernard Sanders, by the way, big L for Bernard there, that he was going to combat anyone that tries to dare tarnish free speech, but also simultaneously go after people for un-American sentiment, stopping censorship and prioritizing the truth. During Cold War, the State Department took the lead in combating malign propaganda from hostile states and in promoting an accurate, positive picture of the United States. These efforts were expanded, if with different emphasis, after September 11th, 2001. But in recent years, whether from an excess of zeal or misguided attempts to control discourse, these activities fundamentally changed. Under the guise of combating mis- and disinformation, agencies and programs of our government, including in this department, have engaged in censorship, suppression, and misinformation of their own. I'm telling you right now, they are going to start punishing speech that they do not think corresponds to American values. Speech like, oh boy here, okay? Pro-Palestinian, not allowed, okay? Anti-Israel, not allowed. Pro-China, ooh, extra not allowed. Get out of here. All in the interest of defending the values of free speech. Those two things are, if you understand the theoretical concept of what free speech represents, those two things are inherently at odds with one another. You can't on the one hand say, we are going to be the defenders of the free speech, and then simultaneously say, and we're going to make sure that people are adequately punished for supporting terrorism or for not being in line with American values and common sense. That means you're going to go after speech. That's what that means. But that is precisely the way that they're going to go about this, where they're just being like, we're the free speech defenders, and also simultaneously, we are going to take out any kind of political opposition. But, you know, one funny moment from the pardoned January 6 rioters is that one of them already got arrested on gun charges. Trump granted clemency to hundreds of alleged or convicted violent criminals. One is back behind bars because a man accused of assaulting a law enforcement officer and tossing an explosive device into a Capitol tunnel on January 6th was rearrested just days after receiving a pardon. His name is Daniel Ball of Homosassa, Florida. That's an awesome name. Homosassa, Florida. On May 2023, was indicted on 12 counts related to his participation in the attack on the Capitol. Charges against him included assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers with a deadly or dangerous weapon, using fire and explosive to commit any felony, and knowingly engaging in any act of physical violence while carrying or using a deadly or dangerous weapon. Ball was accused of throwing an explosive device that detonated upon at least 25 officers in the Capitol's Lower West Terrace tunnel, injuring law enforcement personnel. On Tuesday, Ball's case was dismissed following President Trump's blanket pardon to over 1,500 defendants charged with offenses related to the attempted insurrection. Less than a day later, the Department of Justice rearrested Ball on a separate pending charge related to the unlawful possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. This sassy ass homo is going back to jail, baby. Homo Sassy's very own. He couldn't make it. He couldn't make it out in the real world, chat. He's done. January 6th was nowhere near Ball's first brush with law enforcement. 3 previous felony convictions, including 4 domestic violence, battery by strangulation, resisting law enforcement with violence, and battery against a law enforcement officer, are listed in the charging documents. While Ball was nabbed on a pending charge unrelated to January 6th, the president's widespread amnesty for January 6 offenders let hundreds of individuals charged or convicted of violence during the attack off the hook.